Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who is the founding member of the Dan Campbell fan club. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing good. This has been a victory lap of an off season for me, like you said. The Fighting Dan Campbells are here, and they're here to stay. Let's get it. Let's make it happen. NFC North Division champs, baby. We're calling it right now.
Yes, Kyle, I have a question. Could you argue that this is the division that has one team most set up for success out of any other division, with the Detroit Lions here?
Most set up for success. Yeah, I would say so. I mean,
especially considering what they define success. The Lions, they want to make the playoffs, right? Like, that's what Lions fans are hoping for. For other teams, maybe have higher expectations. Lions will take a playoff berth and hope a win. That would be a good year for them.
Yeah, which knowing Detroit fans means that everything that can go wrong might go wrong. We'll see.
Yes, absolutely. What we're going to do today, if you missed our last show where we talked about the NFC East, you can check that out. But it's the same thing. Kyle is going to give the rankings 4 through 1. I will then give my place. We'll go through each position grouping. I will sort of give my projected tier of what I'm expecting they will be, and then we will give our win rankings, and eventually we'll give our predictions for who's going to win the division.
Yeah, so lots to talk about. Looking forward to it. I'm excited for this one. Anything else you want to touch on before we get started?
No, I think we can just jump into it. You could go, honestly, you could make an argument for any of the other 3 teams, I think, finishing last in this division. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, I do think there is an argument for all the other 3 teams, but I am still going to put the Chicago Bears at the bottom. This is a slow rebuild. I think that they're doing some nice things. They spent some money on some good linebackers. Now, you can argue, is linebacker the best position to invest in if you want to fix your defense? I don't know. Look, I mean, there's a few nice things here. The offense is slowly getting better. There is no more excuses for Justin Fields because they have gotten weapons for him now to work with on this roster. I think they have a couple nice players on the defense, a couple nice young players on the defense, but this secondary, I think, is rough heading into next season, and I think that might be the demise of this defense. And I just don't know if it's going to be good enough to compete. So I got the Bears here at 4.
Yeah, I get it. I do have to say, because I almost asked you, could you argue this is the weakest division in football? I don't think it is because, A, I think the Lions could be pretty good. And B, I think all these other 3 teams have potential. And that's how I feel for Chicago. What am I expecting? I'm not expecting necessarily a ton for Chicago, but there definitely is the optimism, and it really all starts with Fields, right? I mean, that's the thing that we're all looking at with Chicago. What do they have in Justin Fields? They have something unique. They have something we haven't really seen before, maybe ever. In a guy like Justin Fields. But what does that mean? Does that mean he's gonna take the next step and be a incredible dual threat? Because it's he's not a dual threat right now. He's only his own threat. He's a threat to run, which is still effective, but he hasn't really shown the ability to consistently throw the ball down the field. And the question is, how much of that is because he hasn't been able to due to the talent around him, and how much of that is maybe areas of his own game that need improvement? Well, we're going to find out this season.
Yeah, we are definitely going to find out. And to answer your question, I agree. I don't think it's the worst division, but obviously it's not ideal. I have it ranked as the 6th best division in football. 3rd in the NFC, just because I think a couple other divisions have more top end talent than this one. But yeah, I'm with you on Fields. He was PFF's 31st graded passing quarterback out of 34 quarterbacks. So that's definitely got to improve. Like you said, I think every Bears fan in the world has told you the receivers he's thrown to over the last few years. Even when you don't ask them, they're going to tell you the receivers Justin Fields has had over the last few years. But yeah, I mean, I think there is some validity there. I mean, you'd still like to see a little more out of him still, no matter who he's throwing to. But I mean, there is some validity there because it wasn't a very talented receiving core. It might be one of the worst in the league the last couple of seasons. But yeah, now there is no excuse because this young offensive line they've invested in is getting a little bit better. The passing guy, skill position guys that they are invested in are a lot better this season than he's had in recent years. So there is an excuse now. He's got to show it. Or if he's, I mean, the thing is if he's not good, this team's going to be picking high in the draft again, and
Mhm.
they're going to draft his replacement. That's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about the skill. Well, let's just go to head coach first. Eberflus. I don't know. I honestly don't have a ton to say about him. I feel like I didn't. I kind of like what they did last year, but it's also like I think you could argue, well, you didn't get results, but at the same time, I don't know how he could have gotten results with that talent around him. I think we're going to kind of learn who Eberflus is as a head coach this year, as well as Fields.
Yeah, I mean, what did they finish the year? 1-14. I think that's what it was after winning 2 of their first 3 games, and one of
That
those
sounds
was
right.
because of like a hurricane,
Uh huh.
basically. But I do think the one thing I want to give him credit for from last season, despite not getting the results, just because they didn't have the talent to get results, um, adjusting some of his stuff to kind of cater to what this team was. Like
Hmm.
it seemed like this team had a very defined scheme early in the season that they wanted to look a lot like the Colts when he was the defensive coordinator for the Colts.
Hmm.
And then he realized none of that was going to work, so we have to adjust everything. And he adjusted everything, particularly in the offense side of the ball. And they weren't the best team in the world. They weren't good at all, but they were really fun to watch towards the end of the season. And he gave the team and the fans some reason for optimism heading into next year.
Yeah. You talked about the skill position talent. Let's talk about that because obviously the big move was the addition of DJ Moore, who, listen, Panthers fans would have told you that he's as good as Julio Jones. Obviously, he's not quite on that level, but he's still a number one receiver. He's still someone that's going to mean a ton to that offense. And when there wasn't really a DJ Moore on the market, kind of using that first overall pick, to find a way to get him was a really smart move, I thought. This allows Chase Claypool to be a number 2 and allows Darnell Mooney to be a number 3, which I think is where those guys are at their best. You also have Cole Kmet, who I like at the tight end position. So there's guys that kind of check every box here for this receiving core. Also for the running backs, I don't know if I'm, Khalil Herbert, Donta Foreman. I'm not sure if those guys are anything to write home about. Although, again, they could do some nice things. But with what Fields brings in the running game, they're going to it's going to be easier for them to pick up a ton of yards. So I had this as a tier 3 receiving room and a tier 4 halfback room. But again, receiving rooms, basically everyone thinks everyone thinks their favorite team should be better than where it ends up. Because there's a lot of good receiving rooms out there. And I think the halfbacks, while maybe it's not on paper the most talent, it's going to work a lot better in practice.
Um, yeah, I don't think anybody should be calling this higher than tier 3 pass
Yeah.
catchers, honestly. Like
Okay.
it's a significant upgrade to what they had. Don't get me wrong. DJ Moore's nice, and like you said, like we've done this part with DJ Moore all the time. He's
Hmm.
probably closer to a low end number 1 option than he is a high end number 1 option. But people talk about him like he's a high end number 1 option. That being
Hmm.
said, ironically, with Justin Fields, he's another guy where it's like, well, look at the quarterbacks he's had throwing to him.
Right.
So,
Hmm.
one of these two is getting blamed for the situation. It's either Justin Fields is
Uh,
getting blamed if DJ Moore doesn't have an awesome season, or DJ Moore's getting blamed if Fields isn't awesome right away.
or you do
But
both. You do both. You say, well, you can't blame Fields. He only has to throw to DJ Moore. And you can't blame DJ Moore. He only has Fields throwing to him. You can do it
yeah,
both.
yeah, you can do both.
Hmm.
I do like Komet. I don't really know about Chase Claypool. Like, I think the idea of Chase Claypool might actually be better than who Chase Claypool is as a player.
Hmm.
And I just don't know if he's actually I don't know if he's actually a number 2 receiver. So I
Hmm.
am worried a little bit about the depth here. I think Mooney's all right, but yeah, I mean, I worry about the secondary and tertiary options here, but I do like Moore and Komet.
Okay. Well, then to round it out, we have the offensive line, which is there's some real question marks. They drafted Darnell Wright this past draft. They backdrafted him 10th overall. I did not think he was worth that selection. I did not have a very high grade on him. They added Nate Davis at guard position, who should be fine. You have Cody Whitehair and Tevin Jenkins, who both played uh, different guard position. This is confusing to me a little bit because they go out and get Nate Davis, but now they're going to move Tevin Jenkins from right guard to left guard. And then Cody Whitehair, who played left guard, is now going to play center. So a lot of moving parts here for this offensive line. You also have Braxton Jones scheduled, who should be a left tackle and should be a solid left tackle for them. He was good last year. So there's I think the nice thing about this is I don't really see like a clear weakness as long as Darnell Wright comes in and plays well. But I still don't love this offensive line. It's a tier 4 offensive line for me.
Uh, I guess that's fair. There's potential, right? Like
Yeah,
there is
absolutely.
potential this could be a pretty good
There's
offensive
potential for
line.
this team. This is a very high potential team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But like, Tevin Jenkins, I know he's at right guard now, he's moving to left guard, but after a kind of miserable year one and he was dealing with injuries, all that kind of stuff, he was playing tackle. They bounced him inside and it seemed to change everything because he had a very good year too.
Hmm.
If you look at him and Jones, that's a pretty solid left side of the offensive line there. And if Darnell Wright, like I had Darnell Wright kind of high second round. He
Yeah,
goes in the first round, top 10, so that's a bit of a reach. But I don't
just
think
a
he's
bit.
like a bad. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's like a bad prospect or anything. So we'll see if it works. And if it works, then all of a sudden this is a good offensive line heading into the future, and could be good as soon as next season.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I agree with you. So much potential on this team, on the offensive side of the ball. I think maybe that's this thing we bring up because the defense. Listen, stuff to like with the defense. Tremaine Edmonds and T.J. Edwards. I'm actually really fascinated by this. Have we ever seen a team? I think we've seen good linebackers on bad defenses, right? Like Levante David. How many years was he like the only, one of the only good players on that Buccaneers defense? But have we ever seen it where there's two good linebackers on a defense that shouldn't be very good outside of that? I don't know if we've ever seen that before.
No. I'm trying to even think, like, that was the thing that was so bizarre about it, is how much they invested in this position when there's very clear holes just about everywhere else on this roster as far as defense goes.
Hmm.
And their decision was to get two inside linebackers. And, if we're being honest, like Jack Sanborn wasn't even bad last year. It wasn't like this was their biggest position to need either.
Right.
It was
Hmm.
just like, let's get the most talented players on the market, regardless of position.
Yeah, interesting move. They should help out with the coverage. The other guys who will be covering, safeties, I think are solid. I like Jaquan Brisker, fine, and Eddie Jackson. I think, I think in an earlier podcast you said you're not banking on this being him. I kind of think it is. I kind of think he's just a very scheme dependent player. I'm kind of all in on the Eddie Jackson resurgence. The issue is who's going to play corner, which like I don't know. Jalen Johnson's shown flashes. He's another guy where it's like weirdly, I think some Bears fans act like he every now and then there's just like one of those players that I think it's like a fine player, and then like that fan base thinks it's like a superstar. I feel like that's the Jalen Johnson thing. You also have some a lot of young players who maybe could take the next step, right? Like Kyler Gordon could maybe take the next step. Maybe Kendall Vildor. I don't know. He might be the guy who they're hoping to take the next step. I don't know. I'm not banking on any of this. If you have weaknesses in the coverage unit, you're usually in trouble, and there could be some big weaknesses in this coverage unit. So I have it as a tier 5 coverage unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of youth here, you know.
Hmm.
Even like it could be Tyreek Stevenson, the guy they drafted in the second round too, who's playing a lot of
Right.
snaps year one. So I I don't know how they're gonna stop people, honestly, through the air. It's gonna be tough. Like you said, Jackson, maybe it is a scheme thing. Maybe in a better scheme, he's just a better player. And I thought Brisker had a good first year too. That's a nice safety duo. Um, but I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen teams with good safeties and terrible corners not really succeed.
Hmm.
I guess you could say, well, the Bengals did okay with it, but they also had good corners, or at least a good corner, and it was kind of disguising Eli Apple. Um,
Uh-huh.
you know, and this they don't have a corner that I feel like could go out and do like a Woozier impression in disguise as that number one. They just don't have that guy. And maybe Johnson is that guy, or maybe, like you said, Gordon turns into that guy in year two. But until we see any of that, that's just all speculative at this point.
Yeah. The flip side, coverage notoriously fluky. I feel like I'm going to say that on every podcast. A lot of young guys. Maybe one takes the next step. It's not the worst position to be a tier 5 at. I would say, just due to the volatile nature of it.
I mean, between Ed, and Eddie, that is, the two linebackers and the safety,
Okay.
they should cover the middle of the field pretty well. And I guess that's the one thing is you just have to win on the outside occasionally for these
Hmm.
corners. But I mean, you still have, there are still going to be receivers who take advantage of that.
Yeah, but maybe not in this division. I mean, outside of yeah, Justin Jefferson, that's going to be tough. But maybe for playing Green Bay and playing Detroit, maybe being good over the middle is kind of what you want to be.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I
I'm not saying it's the best strategy. I'm just saying in this situation, maybe you're actually in a unique spot where it's if you have to be this team, maybe being in this division isn't the worst thing in the world.
yeah, I think I agree with that. I really hope the Ed, Ed and Eddie nickname takes off.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
That was on the spot by me. I'll take it.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, everyone, try to try to get that. If you're a fan of the Bears, who I realized now I forgot to put the banner up. But if you're a fan of the Bears, definitely make sure that you get the edit and anything going.
All right. Anyway, moving on.
Yes. Moving on. Front seven. Again, we talked about two of the eds. You also have uh, a lot of players who are maybe not someone you've heard of before. I guess DeMarcus Walker, probably the biggest name. I don't know what that's saying, but he's probably the biggest name. Former second round pick. On the defensive line. I also have Kyle. Let's play that. How many guys have you heard of before game on their current listed starting five defensive linemen with three edge rushers, two interior guys? Andrew Billings, Justin Jones, DeMarcus Walker, Trace Gibson, and Rasheem Green.
I knew Billings from when he played at Baylor.
Okay.
Gotta say that's about all I got. Obviously, Walker, he's been around the league for a little bit, so he's a solid player. So that's about all I got for you, though.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, it's no disrespect to any of these players. It's just you're asking them to do more than we expect them to be able to do. Not you personally, but the Bears are.
Yes, I think it's a really rough front seven outside of those two linebackers, and maybe Sanborn. Sanborn, I think, is solid too, but outside of that, they're going to have a lot of responsibility if these guys can't get off blocks or can't make plays in the front.
Yeah. So, as a whole, there's some question marks with this team. They also have, an undrafted free agent kicker looking to be the probably the starter unless Cairo Santos ends up getting the starting job. I don't know. This is a tier 5 kicking room as well. So while there's plenty of optimism to be had with this Chicago Bears team, I do still have them currently projected to. I'm giving them a 6-11 projected record.
Yeah, that probably is fair. I would go under, honestly.
Yeah. Chat, let me know. Under. Are you picking under or over 6 wins?
Yeah, I would go under 6 wins right now. But I mean, not to rain on this team's parade. Listen, the Bears fans have been pining for some relevancy here, and I think they're excited about this team. And you should be excited about some aspects of this team. And I think there are reasons for optimism heading into next season. But I think there are still too many holes to say. Like this is still just another season in a long rebuild, and it still feels like the rebuild is a couple years away. You're still these corners. Cornerback is a position that just takes unless you're Sauce Gardner, who's a one-of-one prospect. Corners take seasoning, and there's really nothing you could do about it other than get reps because young corners get burnt a lot because they're facing the best receivers in the game, and they commit a lot of penalties because they're facing the best receivers in the game. So there's really nothing they can do other than get the reps and get the seasoning they need. And I just think between that, the passing game, I don't really know how they get pressure. Like Walker is their best pass rusher. And I mean, he's basically a league average pass rusher at best, maybe above average. Like, I just don't know how they get pressure, and I don't know how they get stops in the secondary. And that just seems like a disaster of a combination for modern football.
Yeah, but I have to say, there's still excitement. There's still reason. I don't want to rain on the Bears parade too much. There still is reason to think that this could be fun for Chicago. If Justin Fields does take the next step, this offense could potentially be very good. And while maybe one of these young guys takes the next step, you can talk yourself into any team. But yeah, the odds of them doing great this year seem unlikely. I think this is a rebuilding year. I did a community tab of who do you have winning the division. 10% said Chicago. So I don't know who's doing that. I mean, I guess the Bears fans, but that was the least in the division. So community along with you, Kyle, have the Bears 4th in the division.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
All right. Well, then who's third?
Uh, the Minnesota Vikings, the last
Okay.
season's division champions.
The 13-win Minnesota Vikings will finish third in what we're seeing is one of the worst divisions in football.
Look, there's still things to like about this team. Don't get me wrong. I think for as up and down as he can be sometimes, I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. I
Mhm.
think that they have Justin Jefferson, who's one of the best, if not the best, one of the best skill position players in all of football. T.J. Hawkinson's a nice supporting piece. They got some decent pieces on the offensive line. Um, I worry about how there's still some unproven guys I feel like in the skill position department now stepping into bigger roles. And I worry about this defense. I have said it before this offseason. I think there's a chance this is one of the worst defenses in football next season. I think the corner situation is rough. I think the secondary situation is rough. I said Harrison Smith, which if you're relying on an 857-year-old Harrison Smith to be your best defensive player, I think that's a problem. There's a couple good defensive ends, but I think they're just about bad everywhere else, and I think that's a problem. So I got the Vikings here with their defense kind of falling apart, finishing third in the division.
Yeah, I get it. Here's the interesting thing. I think Kirk Cousins is the best quarterback in this division. I think if I need one of these guys to win me a game right now, I'm picking Kirk Cousins over Fields and Love, who are both I still feel very young and unproven. And I think Goff. Lions fans would take Goff, but I think I would still rather have Cousins. But I also don't disagree. I mean, and there's players to like on this team. It's not like a talentless roster. This really is a team that I think lacks depth more than it lacks their big names.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even think that's a hot take. I think Kirk Cousins is clearly the best quarterback in this division right now, unless
Lions
Jordan
fans
Love.
will disagree.
That's fine. I mean,
Hmm.
look, we're going to talk about golf in a second, but I mean, I do think Kirk Cousins is the best quarterback in this division, and I think we'll get to it in a second. But yeah, I mean, like I think that's true, and I think Justin Jefferson is probably by far the best skill position player in this division. Um, but like you said, I mean, okay, so they got quarterback, one wide receiver, right tackle, left tackle, and tight end. I guess that's a little bit, but are you excited about anybody else in this offense? Like this feels like one of those teams like we talk about the Cowboys over and over again about a team that's like very star dependent. This feels like the most star dependent team in football right
Well, let's get into it. Let's start off with the two people at the Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins, the two guys at the the most important two people we'll be talking about today. Again, Cousins isn't I don't know. I feel like it's almost like because of his contract and because he became the guy that you always talk about as the good quarterback who you don't give a big contract to because you can't win that way. I feel like that does kind of in many ways underrate Kirk Cousins. He's been a consistent a fringe top 10 quarterback basically for, how long now? 7 years, 8 years now?
now. Yeah, I mean, if we talk about the guys in his tier, like if you talk about, I know Stafford won a Super Bowl, but if you look at the last couple of seasons, he's probably been better than Stafford, Derek Carr, Tannehill probably, if you include Tannehill's last season, which wasn't good.
Hmm.
Dak Prescott, Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, who else can you put in this tier of quarterback? He's probably been the best of that group
Jared
over the
Goff.
last. Yeah. He's probably been the best of that tier for the last couple of seasons. But I mean, it seems like primetime Kirk is a legitimate thing. Like,
Hmm.
it seems like he legitimately struggles in those big moments in those big games. And that's what people highlight. That in the contract is when the lights are brightest and everyone is watching Kirk Cousins, he hasn't risen to the moment, and that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what there is to that, but I don't know why that's the case, but it does seem to be a thing. So I guess you got to just go with it. The receiving core, the highlight of this roster, I think, is Justin Jefferson. I think that
Mhm.
if you were picking players today to start a franchise with outside of the quarterback position, is Justin Jefferson the guy?
Uh, I think I mean it's got to be between him and Jamar Chase at this point. Just if you're factoring in age too. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean
exactly.
I think it's got to be him. I think last year I believe we can go back and look at our NFL predictions podcast, which we did right before the season, and one of us here, me specifically, patting myself on the back. picked Justin Jefferson as the preseason offensive player of the year. That looked
Hmm.
pretty good because he ended up winning the award. And yeah, I mean, there's really no debate about it. And at this point, he is a legitimate guy. He has been in his 3 seasons. He is ranked as PFF's second best receiver, fourth best receiver, and third best receiver. So he's consistently great. And I mean, he's one of the best in the game, no doubt.
Yeah. And as for the other receivers, you have Jordan Addison, the rookie, who they're expecting to be that number 2 guy. KJ Osborne, who I like as a number 4 option. I think he does well as a number 4 option because Hawkinson is the number 3 option. To me, the question of this receiving core and why I can't put it in, to me, it's in between tier 2 and tier 3. I think I'm still going to. I think I'm going to go tier 3. I think if I'm on defense, you have to go with what I don't. I think you go under for the receiving core, but it all comes down to Jordan Addison. If Jordan Addison comes in and does what they want him to do, and it's like a solid number 2 option, who can win on the outside, but also does great stuff over the middle, this is a potential tier 1 caliber receiving core just because of the threat of Jefferson, which can open up stuff for Addison, Osborne, and Hawkinson.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, like, at least with Jefferson and Hawkinson, you're probably saying tier 3 is the floor, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
at minimum, yeah. I mean, it just feels like tier 3 is the floor, and if Addison's good, it's probably tier 2 at minimum. And then if he's really good in year 1, it's tier 1. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what Addison's going to look like at the next level. That's the biggest question. So yeah, I mean, this is a high floor and even higher ceiling kind of skill position group because they have, you know, one of the best players in the game. I mean, just straight up.
Yeah. To round out the offense, halfbacks Alexander Madison, I think is a fine player. It's still tier 5 running back room for me though. I'm not sure if I like him as a starter, but we'll see. The offensive line's interesting. Darisaw was like kind of underratedly awesome last year. His all his like advanced stats and stuff were incredible. Brian O'Neill I think is a good right tackle. And then the interior is interesting. Urza Cleveland and then Garrett Bradbury, I think are both fine at their role. Like Bradbury was a first round pick who hasn't really lived up to that hype, but they're fine. Ed Ingram was a second round pick last year who he graded out horribly last year. Last year was not a good year for Ed Ingram. And I think the question is going to be, what are we going to see out of Ed Ingram? I have it as a tier 3 offensive line. But again, if he does take the next step and lives up to his draft stock this next season, this could definitely be a team that, I could see the offensive line getting better. So I actually have tier 3s across the board on offense, but I feel like many of them are closer to tier 2 than actually my voice gave out for a second. Many of them, I think many are closer to tier 2 than tier 4. Also, not tier 3 across the board, halfback tier 5. But other than that, tier 3 across the board.
Yeah. I think I agree with that, which is, I mean, that's the thing that's so crazy about this team. And kind of like what I was saying is like Jefferson is debatably the best player in football. It's a tier 3 receiving core.
Right.
Darisaw and O'Neill might be the best tackle combination in the league. Like they both graded out as 2 top 10 offensive tackles last season. And this is still a tier 3 offensive line. And so that's why it's just like, how many of these guys, like, if they lose one of those guys for an extended period of time, is that bad? Like, is this a disaster then for this situation? Because I don't know if they have the depth to cover for if a Darisaw, O'Neill, or Jefferson goes down.
Yeah. Also, this comment of Jackson turned into Kermit the Frog for a second. Just doing my Patrick Mahomes impersonation. That's all that was. I mean, it wouldn't be good if that happens. That certainly wouldn't be ideal if one of those guys gets hurt. But we'll see. Also, I think disrespect to Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata saying that O'Neill and Darisaw are the best.
I said they're in the conversation. I said they might be. Like, I think they can have a debate about it. I mean, they're definitely in the conversation with that.
What about Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor?
No. They don't make my list.
Okay, not quite on the list. Moving on to the defense for the Vikings, and yes, we have to talk about their defense as well. Again, it's one of those things where you can talk yourself into it. Like you can find the coverage. I guess maybe you'd have to struggle a little bit to talk yourself into it. Yeah. There's some good players. I'll say this. There's some good players. Like I like Harrison Smith. I know he's old. Okay, he's still an effective player. I don't know what we're getting out of him, but he's still an effective player. If Byron Murphy plays like Byron Murphy, he's an effective player. I don't know if I love the contract, but he's an effective player. Could Andrew Booth take the next step? Are we? Is a Caleb Evans finally gonna? Is he gonna be a great player next year? It's not looking great, Kyle.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, they're they're hoping Harrison Smith can put together another solid season, which he is a fantastic football player. He has been for over a decade, and that's the problem. He's been playing for over a decade, so I don't know how much more we can bank on him being a fantastic football player. And that's my biggest problem with this team is that's basically what it's banking on, or internal development of a lot of guys. There is a lot of guys that need to get better. Like you said, you mentioned Evans, you mentioned um, Andrew Booth. Those guys need to get a lot better. Bynum needs to get a lot better based on what he was in year 2. He was solid in year 1, but he took a step back last season. And then I don't know, like, look, I don't think Byron Murphy's a bad player, but if he's your best player in your secondary, that's probably not a recipe for success.
Right.
And like, yeah, they let, I don't necessarily blame them for letting Patrick Peterson go because, he's kind of been an inconsistent player his entire career. He's kind of up and down all the time. But at the same time, like, it didn't seem like there was a plan to replace him other than hope some of these young guys get better.
Yeah, I mean, that is the plan. Like the idea is Andrew Booth and Lewis Seen, who have done. We've seen nothing. We've seen 107 snaps combined between the two of them.
Mhm.
What are they going to come in and be able to do? If they can both come in and just be starting caliber players, then it doesn't look that bad, right? Okay, well now you have Byron Murphy and Andrew Booth, two starting caliber corners. You have if Harrison Smith's solid, you have two starting caliber safeties. Okay, now this looks a little bit better. I'm putting it at tier 5 coverage. That's just such a there's always going to be a way you can talk yourself into any team having success, but the odds of this happening are the odds of all of that going right seem very slim.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and you know, I don't even know if they're. I don't see them. Danielle Hunter is going to have a fantastic season rushing the passer to make this secondary look good. It feels like, and I just don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, and if you know me, I always say that doesn't happen. People think it happens, but it doesn't happen. Pass rushers don't make coverage units look all of a sudden look better. Obviously, it all works together. It helps, but bad secondary is going to be bad.
Yeah, and this looks like a bad secondary. So yeah, I'm just there's nothing I feel like Vikings fans could say to me to get me optimistic about this group. Like I said it before, I think there's a good chance this could be the worst defense in the league.
Yeah. There is some bright spots though. You brought up the edge rushers, Danielle Hunter and Marcus Davenport. I thought was a really good 1 year flyer. I think that'll really help out Minnesota. So getting those two edge rushers, that does seem to be their plan a little bit as well. Is get guys who can rush the passer pretty effectively, and I think they should be able to do that. I also don't hate this interior with is it just Chris Tonga? Spelled Khyris, Kyrus Tonga. Also Harrison Phillips as a couple of the interior guys who should be pretty good interior guys. I think that Jordan Hicks and Brian Asamoah as well for the linebackers should be solid. So I'm actually going to go tier 2 run defense and pass rush here.
Yeah, I mean there's a chance that it could be good. I mean we have to kind of see it in theory. I mean, like Asamoah had flashes, but what did he play? Less than 200 snaps last season.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be better, but at the same time, we haven't seen enough of we haven't seen him play. Jordan Hicks is a guy who's been in the league for quite a while too, and hasn't exactly been a fantastic player overall. So it's just like I don't know. I think it could be a tier 2, but I would probably bump it a little lower outside of Hunter and Davenport.
Maybe, and part of it is I think Hunter and Davenport are two star players. And again, it's always weird where it's like, how do you rate the stars and the depth and all of that? And I feel like I don't know. I'm not saying that I think Hicks is going to be a superstar. I think it'll just be a fine, solid linebacker for them. And if Asamoah can do that, again, we kind of talked about with the Bears. Linebackers kind of are a position where it tends to work well when everything around it is working well. I think I like the defensive line enough. I think they'll be able to do their part. You could talk me into tier 3 run defense, but I like the tier 2 pass rush at least.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the highlight of this defense and what Vikings fans are going to be most optimistic about. But I just think they're relying on those guys a little too much.
Yeah. It's definitely fascinating with this roster. So as a whole, it's kind of hard to give it a rating really because I do think that there's some things to like about it and there's some real concerns I have with it. I don't think I can put this team above 500, but I don't think I'm going to put them that below 500. I'm going to give them an 8 and 9 projection here because I do like things. I like Cousins. I like the receiving core enough. I like the coaching staff. Coaching staff basically did the same thing the Giants coaching staff did, but no one really. Everyone just said, Vikings got lucky, and then the Giants, it's great coaching. It's like they kind of both did the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that I would have given the Giants, I would have given Dable the coach of the year, but you could make the argument for Minnesota as well. But there's flaws on the roster. So 8 and 9, and again, if the coverage can just get under control, that's the way that they're successful. That's the way they can get to the playoffs. I think that's their best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is it doesn't, and then they're not really able to be competitive at all. And there's probably a better chance the worst case scenario happens than best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at too. Like I would have it slightly under, but I mean, I do see the upside for this team being over. They have insane skill position talent. Jefferson can, single-handedly win games basically at this point. I
That's
just think
Buffalo
that
last year.
yeah, exactly. So, that is something that's possible. I just think that, they you, I think you could do the injury conversation for just about every team, but it feels like this team specifically could, lose one or two specific guys and kind of fall off the face of the earth, right? Like it's just like I I don't know how much they can survive depth beyond, if you look at their best players, they have one, two, three, four, five probably blue chippers and Kirk Cousins. I don't know how many of those guys they can afford to lose before this potentially goes haywire. And I could see a scenario where that goes haywire. And I could just see a scenario where that depth doesn't help those guys enough. And even if those guys are healthy, they're just not good enough around, or on the margins to win football games, and it catches up to them because they won a lot of one score games, and it could easily swing the other way next season.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of the Rams a little bit. People talk about because obviously Kevin O'Connell from the Rams coaching tree, from the McVay coaching tree, where they obviously built their team around stars. The issue though is the Rams did a great job at getting these just so many different contributors from different places. We'll see if the Vikings do that. Maybe they are going to follow the Rams in the Rams' footsteps and get like 15 starters that are, fifth round picks. But I'm not going to bet on it until I see it happen.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Vikings. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about, like you said, how lucky this team got, but they still managed to win those games. Like you have to give them credit at some point for
Yeah.
winning football games. So it'll be fast. They're a fascinating case study to watch for next season.
Yeah. All right, Kyle. Are you going with the Detroit Lions here at number 2, or are you going to make Lions fans happy and pick the Packers, who I have to say, I think some people are maybe a little disappointed. Packers are still in the top 2. Is there a hot take coming, or are you doing what most people expect, which is the Packers?
I am taking the Packers here at number 2. I think I'm a little more, I'm not necessarily writing this team off just yet, just because they lost Aaron Rodgers. Like, I don't know if Jordan Love's good for certain. Like, I think he could be pretty good. I think he, it's too hard to tell, right? It's too hard to tell. It's too early in his career. He's gotten very little sample size to work off of. The little sample size that he played last year, he was all right. So we'll see what happens with Jordan Love, but it felt like just last season, everything that could go wrong did go wrong for this Green Bay team. And a lot of that had to do with the young players on this roster just seemingly not being ready for the expectations we bestowed on them. And, maybe they don't get better and this all of a sudden gets a lot worse. But I could see, with some of the talent that they have around them, I could see a lot of these young players getting better, taking leaps forward, and being more competitive as the season starts. Because I think this team, by the end of the year, I know they lost that Lions game and that Lions loss looked bad, but I think they got better as the season went along. And a lot of those young guys, I thought by the end of the season that were really struggling and having the Packers lose games, looked a lot more competitive by the end of the season. I thought that played a big part in the Packers making that final push to the playoffs, even if they just missed out. I do think those guys can get better, and this team could be pretty good next season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the more interesting teams in football, right? I mean, one of the
Yeah.
more interesting storylines is going to be the Jordan Love of it all.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's replacing a legend who
Yeah,
replaced another legend.
right,
And so, the cocky Packers fans say, "Oh, we know how to identify quarterbacks. We got Brett Favre, we got Aaron Rodgers is just the next one in line." The less optimistic Packers fans will say, "Well, we can't have lightning strike 3 times now." Which
right.
it would be very fortunate if Jordan Love is really good. That being said, I mean, this is the guy they took in the first round, whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision.
The
They
wrong decision.
clearly valued, yeah, they clearly valued his talent level, and he has shown flashes of being a pretty good quarterback. I don't know if it's going to work out long term, but there is potential there, and I do see the potential of him being a pretty good quarterback next season.
Yeah. Kyle, guess how many passes Jordan Love has in his career?
It's definitely sub 100.
Yeah,
So let's
94
go
total passes.
94.
Has
Yeah.
not been throwing the ball a lot here. So we really don't know much about him. I have him as tier 5 for now, but that's just because he's a total wild card. He could totally
Yeah.
improve and totally be better. It's just a complete wild card. I'm interested in seeing how, LaFleur does with him. And LaFleur is also in a post Rodgers world. I had him as a tier 2 head coach. It's a complete wild card, and because of that, that makes the Packers kind of a wild card heading into this year and into the season.
Yeah, I mean it's the number one question. I mean, like it seems too easy to say, but I mean, legitimately, if you don't have your quarterback answered in the NFL, we don't really know what to do with you. And if your quarterback's a question mark, I mean, you don't really have an answer to your future that your franchise. So they're going to get that answer from Love this season. And similar to what we said with Justin Fields, if it doesn't work out this year, they're bringing in somebody else. They're going to find his replacement by next season.
You think they would? You think they're going to give Love 1 year?
I mean, I don't think the plan is to give him 1 year, but if he's bad, yeah, I think they're gonna draft somebody else.
I don't know. I think he would have to be Zach Wilson bad to for them to move off of him after 1 year. With
I
how
mean,
much they invested into him,
how good does he have to be to give him another year?
I think he just has to be like a top 25 starting quarterback in football. I think they're going to give him another year. I would actually think that if he was like a bottom 5 quarterback in football, they would still give him another year. Say, let's give him time. It's not fair to a quarterback to have to give up on them after 1 year.
Um, Maybe, I don't know, like, because I feel like if he's a bottom 5 quarterback, they're gonna have probably a top 6 or 7 pick.
Yeah, but also if he's gone, everyone's getting fired. Like this is the. I think about how much was writing on this, and I guess it's different because there's no owner for the Packers, so maybe that changes things. But uh, think about how they ran a superstar quarterback out of town. They didn't draft T. Higgins, who could have helped them. I still feel like they win at least a Super Bowl if they made that selection instead. They put so much into the Jordan Love pick working. I can't imagine after 1 year they'll say, "Well, we screwed that up." I think they're going to say, "Well, we got to give him another year."
I guess possibly, but at the same time, that sounds like it's trying to justify your bad decision with more bad decisions, you
Sure,
know.
but I think
But
they'll do that.
there could be the human element of that. But that being said, we'll see on that. I don't know. I don't want to, write him off as bad right away. I do think there's potential that he could be pretty good. And lucky for him, he's going into this situation with the head coach who really knows how to work with quarterbacks, and that's Matt LaFleur, who I really value as a head coach. So I think going into that situation, I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to make him look terrible in year one either. And I think that's going to help him going forward. And, I think I guess you want to get into the rest of the offense, and I can share my thoughts with that.
Yeah, let's do that. First, we have a super chat though. Who is the better quarterback at their primes and presently as well? Matthew Stafford or Russell Wilson? Um, I think I would probably say Russell Wilson better at his prime, but Stafford better now.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson was a legit MVP candidate in his prime.
Uh huh.
Um, yeah, I guess I would say
He would have had an MVP vote if Chris Collinsworth got his MVP vote in on time.
that's true. Yeah, I would say he was better in his prime, but at the same time, I, yeah, I guess I would take Stafford right now. I guess
Yeah.
there's a lot of questions behind both. So,
Yes, great question, Fart Poop. Yeah, as you said, with the Luckily for Jordan Love as well, he's got a team loaded with receiving talent across the board.
Hey, this is a pro Christian Watson podcast.
Sure. Christian Watson he was very good last year, I thought, and really showed some flash, especially towards the end of the year when they kind of, let him sort of work on the outside. I just don't know if he's a true number one receiver yet, but he might be. He has that potential for sure. I thought that, in, his first year trying to do that, he was able to do it at times, but also kind of, couldn't do it quite as consistently as maybe you would like. But also, he's a rookie who had no training camp trying to be a number one receiver. It's going to be a little bit difficult to do that perfectly, but he still did a pretty good job. The issue is, who else is going to be, working here? Are we expecting Romeo Dobbs breakout season? Samori Toure? Samori Toure? I don't know how you say that name. I apologize. I don't know. They have some, couple of rookies, Jaden Reed, Grant Dubose in the 7th round they added. I don't know. There's guys who are options. Luke Musgrave, another rookie tight end. This is tier 5, Kyle. I like Christian Watson, but this is not. There's some real issues here. The Packers, almost by design, don't put much emphasis on the receiver position.
Yeah, the problem is everybody's so young, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I like Christian Watson a lot. I thought that was an excellent draft pick when they made it. I thought they really got a steal there. And, he dropped his first pass of his career, and it looked like a disaster. And everything got significantly better as the year went along. He was a legitimate, top 15 option by the end of the year, which is crazy to say, but, he was the guy for this team for probably their best stretch of football last season. But yeah, everything is so young. I thought Dobbs, Romeo Dobbs had flashes, but very small flashes, and not exactly didn't blow anybody away. I thought there was potential he could be a nice second option.
Yeah.
I kind of like Jaden Reed from college. I like Luke Musgrave too. I think those are both interesting options, but everybody is so young. I think in the best version of these prospects, this could be a really good receiving core, but this feels like it's still years away from being what it could be, unless guys like Watson take another leap. Jaden Reed's good in year 1. Dobbs takes another leap, but that's asking a lot for one season.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, the halfback room, tier 1 for me. People sort of forgot about people forgot about Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is still great. I think AJ Dillon was as good last year as we've seen him in past, but he's still great. This is 2 really good halfbacks, tier 1.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and so there's been a lot of running back conversations over the last couple of days, and that's obviously I think we both stand on the same side as running back. It stinks for these guys that they can't get the contracts that they want and can't get paid by the time they hit their pay structure because of the way the rookie salaries work. But it's just kind of the nature of the thing. However, when I look at running backs, I feel like great running back rooms could provide a nice floor for an offense to where you're not a disaster at least. And I feel like when I look at Jones and Dillon specifically, these are 2 guys that I feel like could provide a nice floor for an offense where we talked about this receiving core is extremely young and working really hard to get better than what it is because we don't know how good any of these guys are going to be. They're going to rely a lot on this running game, and it at least probably helps these receivers get a little bit better, knowing that every team is going to be prioritizing Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon in the backfield.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating. The offensive line, also fascinating. So on one hand, the left side of the line, David Bakhtiari and Ellington Jenkins. No notes, right? That should be very good. The right side of the line, I have some notes, Kyle. You have first off, Zach Tom, the 4th round pick from a year ago, who some people loved, and he actually played all right last year. That was kind of one of those things where people fell in love with him and were giving him first round grades, and I'm like, oh, you people are silly, and then he ended up being pretty solid. But again, I don't know if I love him as a starting right tackle. John Runyon, who should be the starting guard for them, fine. You have Josh Myers, who I don't know. He's an NFL caliber player. I would say personally, Kyle, maybe a hot take. I would have rather drafted Creed Humphrey over Josh Myers. I think that might have been the better move.
Yeah, yeah. You think that's the better move
I
now?
think in hindsight, yeah, maybe they should have gone with
Yeah.
the guy who's graded as the best center in football both years he's been in the league.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna say should he have been, if you're gonna compare it to Creed Humphrey, obviously I can't come
Right.
back from that. That being
Hmm.
said, like I did like Zach Tom as a prospect just a year ago.
Hmm.
I did like Josh Myers as a prospect just 2 years ago. Like I haven't necessarily written those guys off as like they can't work. And Josh Myers actually, he graded out pretty well as a pass blocker last season. Now, is that playing with Rodgers or is that, who he is in general? We'll see. But it's another one of those groups where Bakhtiari is not young. Bakhtiari is, but he's still, fantastic even at 32. But you look at the rest of this group, like it's like Caleb Jones drafted in 2022. There's a lot of 2022 and 2023 draft classes in this group. So, this is a team that historically has developed offensive line really well. Maybe a couple of these guys work out, but like there are guys in this line that I think we're good prospects, and I'm not giving them up on them yet, but we need to see it before we can really, get excited about it.
Yeah. Let's move on to the defense. Defense is fascinating. It's like one of those things where it's like on paper, like the cover. I have no notes for the coverage, right? Like J. Alexander, Razul Douglas, Keeson Nixon, I think is a fine number three, and still have Eric Stokes. Maybe he can do something because he had I thought a promising rookie year and then took a step back in year two. Darnell Savage and Rudy Ford, I think should be a solid. I don't know what happened with Darnell Savage last year. I feel like
Yeah,
he's usually been like a fine safety. I don't know why things went off the rails last year. So it's like I don't know. Devondre Campbell, really good linebacker. Quay Walker was, I thought, kind of a mess last year. Again, linebacker is so weird that like there's people that think that Quay Walker was awesome last year. I don't know. I don't get why some people view things certain ways. But as a whole, like I'm still going to go tier two coverage. Like I know it wasn't
yeah.
great last year, but on paper it should be good. These guys have played well as a unit before. I'm going to assume they're going to be good this year, right? That seems reasonable.
Uh, yeah, I still like the players on this team, so I can't really dock it any lower than that. And even the younger guys like Savage and Stokes, I still think you play a lot better than what they did last season. I didn't love Quay Walker in the draft. I thought there was flashes of him playing pretty well. He also pushed a trainer, so I don't really know how to rate him. I thought there was flashes of him playing really well, but I'm willing to concede that maybe this gets better because linebackers typically take a little bit longer to get pretty good. So maybe this all gets better because it felt like those three young guys specifically were kind of what killed this defense last year. When we were talking, this could be the best defense in football. We were saying that last year. I felt like that kind of killed it. Maybe those guys get better, and then it actually is the best defense in football. Now that we're not as optimistic about it, so I do like those guys. I like Jair Alexander's obviously a star. Campbell's a star. Douglas is a very good player. So I do think it could be better. The biggest thing for me with the defense was like I was shocked they brought back Joe Barry as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That felt like a major mistake based on what the performance was last season. But maybe it was similar one of those things that, his pitch to the coaching staff to stay on the team was, you know, we're developing these young guys and once they get better, we're going to be really good.
Yeah, possibly. Also, I forgot to put the banner up, so anyone who's just tuning in now, because they skipped ahead to the Packers. Sorry, we started talking about them a little bit early. Been bad at the banners today, Kyle. Not a good banner day for me.
Yeah. It's all right. Well, they can figure it out. They can scroll.
Yeah, yeah. Just watch the whole show, maybe. We
Yeah.
do our best here.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. You're going to learn about the Ed, Ed and Eddie nickname for the
Yeah,
Chicago
right.
Bears. So there you go.
Oh, you shouldn't have given away. You should have just let it be there, and then they'd have to listen to the whole thing to figure out what it was.
Fair enough. Oh, well.
Hmm.
Bad podcasting by me.
Yes. The bad podcasting by not giving by giving away what we've already mentioned in the podcast earlier.
Yes.
The front seven of the Packers. Interior, you have Kenny Clark, who's usually very good, although didn't have his best year last year. Also, you have Devontae Wyatt, who I loved coming out of college. Like all his advanced numbers were great. Kind of the only issue with him was he was kind of a 1 year wonder coming out of college. He didn't look terrible when he was on the field. He was just barely on the field. Like that was kind of the weird
Hmm.
thing with Wyatt. Um, pass rushers, you have Rashad Gary, who again, when on the field is borderline elite, but wasn't on the field that much last year. Got banged up. Preston Smith, who how much does he still have in the tank? We'll see. They also drafted Lucas Van Ness, who some people really liked. I thought it was a bit of a reach on that, and I already mentioned Campbell and Walker. So man, there's some real potential, right? But I also have some concerns with it. I feel like it could go a lot of different ways. I'm going to just go tier threes across the board, but this could legitimately be tier ones across the board or tier fives across the board, depending on how it goes.
I don't know if he'll get to tier 5, but maybe. I don't know. I'm expecting big things from Clark and Wyatt, honestly. I think that Clark's gonna have a bounce back season. I think Wyatt's a really good player. I think he's gonna be a guy. So I think that's gonna really help this group. And Preston Smith as a secondary pass rusher, I think, is a really good option. Rashawn Gary is the number one guy. Smith is older, but I do think as a secondary guy, I do think that's going to be big for them. And then you look at Campbell too. I think he's a stud in the linebacker spot. So I really like this front seven. I think there's a lot of potential for it to be good too. But it goes back to the thing: why was this defense so bad last year? And part of it was also they couldn't stop the run. And they need bounce back seasons from. They need a bounce back season from Clark, and they need a breakout season from Wyatt to really fix that.
Yeah, and then Quay Walker to step it up. I mean, because it's great that Devondre Campbell is great, but you can just run to the other side, and Walker can't make the play. I mean, you need him to at least be a solid linebacker next year.
Yeah, this defense does have some variance. Like, I don't think it'll ever be the worst defense in the league or anything like that, but like, they really need some improvement of the guys who let them down last season. Otherwise, this just isn't going to work.
Yeah, the community tab gave the Packers a 15% said the Packers would win the division, which was lower than the Vikings. The Vikings were actually, I just updated it. It's changed. It's 14% now for the Packers. 25% said Minnesota. I have to say, I agree with the community tab. I had the Packers as third in this division. I'm giving them a 7-10 projected record. There's things to like about this team, and there's definitely a high ceiling for this team, but there's just too many questions here. I'm not buying into Green Bay.
That's it. That's fair. Like, I can't blame you because there are, it is a lot of question marks, but I'll buy into it.
What's your record projection?
I'm going 9-8. I think they're the seventh playoff team in the NFC.
Oh wow, that feels. I feel that's a bit of a hot take.
I think they're going to sneak in. Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's not a lot of great options in the NFC, and I think there's enough stuff here to kind of be interested in this team. So I'll take the Packers hype.
So you're buying into the Jordan Love era Packers.
Yeah, why not? Give me all the Jordan Love stock. I think he could be pretty good.
All right. Well, let's talk about the team we're all here to talk about. America's team, the Detroit Lions, the team that we are, when is the last time there's been this much hype around Detroit? Because they've made the playoffs before, but I don't know. I feel like there's more expectations than just that. Saying that the Lions will be a one-and-done playoff team would be an insult to the Lions this year, and I think rightfully so. I do think the two people we have to talk about to start, actually, let me give the floor to you. Why did you have the Lions at number one?
They vastly improved their defense, which was bad last season, and they've done a combination of developing a lot of their young guys to where their young guys are a little more competitive now, and they filled in around the edges with veterans, and I think that's a really nice way to build a roster. So I really like that group, but the story of this team, as good as as much as better as I think the defense is going to be, the story of this team is the offensive side of the ball. They have put together a really nice group between a elite offensive line, a elite pass catcher. I think that's going to be a pretty good run game, and a offensive coordinator that I'm baffled didn't get a head coaching job and maybe he just didn't like the options out there because he has this pick of the litter right now. I think Ben Johnson, maybe outside of Kyle Shanahan, is the best offensive mind in football right now. I think he's doing such an elite job with this group. I think the way that he's able to get all of these guys open all the time is amazing. And I think it makes up for some of the margins on this team where, I don't love the secondary receivers on this team. But I like them a lot more when they're playing with Ben Johnson because I think Ben Johnson's going to find the way to get them the ball in space and make it easy for them. So I think that Ben Johnson is making a huge leap for this team. I think he's done wonders with Jared Goff the last couple of years. And I think it makes the Lions a legitimate, you know, they're not San Francisco or Philadelphia as far as contenders go, but maybe they're on that next tier. Maybe they're on that next tier with the Dallas where maybe they're looking to capitalize on something. They just need to win one playoff game. I think that is a fantastic option to be in as far as what you're looking at this Lions team going in the future.
Wow. So Ben Johnson over Sean Payton?
Yeah, I would take him right now.
Wow, that's a hot take.
That might be. I've just been blown away with what he's done the last couple of years. He has been
You say last couple, but it's been 1 year, right? I mean, it was really last year.
Sure. But I mean, they
Which
still
was
show
great.
flashes. Yeah, I mean, they still show flashes of it the year before too. But I mean, they got even better last season. And yeah, I mean, I think he did some amazing stuff with this team last season. I do not think, if you look at the skill position group here and the quarterback, this this team played like one of the best offenses in football, and this is not a tier one quarterback or a tier one skill position group. It just isn't.
Yeah, interesting. Listen, I'm not going to come on here and be a Ben Johnson hater or anything. He's if the, top 5 with a bullet. You can't even argue not top 5. He's been incredible, and I agree. Should have gotten a head coaching job. The interesting thing is we talk about the two most important people for this team, Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. Both were tier 3 for me. Now, Dan Campbell has done some great things. Hiring Ben Johnson for one has been a great thing he's done. Seems like one of the best motivators. Just can never fully tell when you're not in the room, but just from the outside looking in, seems very good. The defense has been a bit of an issue, and I think that's probably been mostly a talent thing. So I'm interested in seeing what he does now. But you could argue tier 3 is too low for him. It feels too low, but there's just so many good head coaches. Goff, though, is the question, right? What is the ceiling of a Jared Goff led team? I have him as tier 3. Again, some people say he should be the best quarterback in the league and no one should even come close. I don't think anyone actually says that, but it makes my argument look better. What's the ceiling of a Jared Goff led team? I mean, that's the question that we're going to be asking ourselves when you're paying Jared Goff $30 million. What can you do? Because when you're not paying him, you can get to the Super Bowl. We saw it with the Rams. But what's going to happen here? It's just an interesting question.
Yeah. And the contract isn't bad. Like his if you look at $30 million, it sounds crazy to say, but doesn't feel that bad anymore for a tier 3 quarterback, just based on what the valuation market is today. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is. I guess we're going to see this season what the ceiling is because there's a lot of expectations for this team. Do I think he's going to win a Super Bowl this year? I probably wouldn't predict it. I don't know if he's going to be a Pro Bowler this year, but at the same time, he's been good in this system. And I think that's the big thing is yes, we can judge Jared Goff individually as an individual quarterback and say, you know what? I think there's better options out there. In this system, he has been really good. So, I don't know if I would pay him another contract beyond this. I would probably look for an upgrade after that. But at the same time, he has been good the last couple of seasons. And a lot of that has been the work of Johnson and Dan Campbell, who, like you said, has been really good for this team the last couple of years. It's funny because he came in with the I'm biting people's kneecaps off press conference. He came out with this ultra aggressive personality. And I think he does like a level of physicality in his football teams. Like if you look at the guys he's drafted the last few years, they drafted Penei Sewell in the first round, top 10. They drafted a guy like Jeff McNeil in the third round as a defensive tackle. They drafted a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. They drafted a Jack Campbell in the first round. They definitely winning on the interior and winning on the trenches. But he also has this element of he hired this offensive coordinator to run this really progressive and open offense. He is one of the most analytically inclined coaches in football. Yeah. And maybe this is a just really nice marriage of, the best of both worlds where you have the analytical kind of progressive side of the game. And you also have the guy who wants to go punch people in the mouth,
Right.
Who isn't afraid of the street fight. So maybe it is one of the best of both world scenarios that you have here, that he's just a really good coach and he understands the game.
Yeah. And I'll also say, going back to my last point about before we move on to the rest of the offense, the Jared Goff thing, Well, listen, PFF had him graded as the 20th overall quarterback. That's kind of around where I thought that he was. A lot of his sort of box score stats were a lot better. I think I would also kind of sit here and say, at the end of the day, who cares if he's the one making the offense work or if he's just a part of it? If the offense is working, the offense is working. So at the end of the day, it might be just more of an interesting thought experiment than it is actually worthwhile in predicting how the Lions will do next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Midwest version of Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like, you know,
Hmm.
San Francisco's offense was really good and they were really successful when Jimmy Garoppolo played quarterback.
Yeah.
You don't have to like have questions about it. Yeah, yeah, he's not the best quarterback in the league, but at the same time, like if it works, it works. That's what it is.
Yeah, let's talk about the receiving core because I think a question I have is how much of what happened last year. Like, listen, Amon-Ra St. Brown was amazing. He's in that Cooper Cup category at this point. He's in that conversation of how because of how good he was last year of like the elite slot receivers. Um, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones. You also have Jamison Williams, who was the first round selection, who was I think it might have been both of our number one receivers. He was certainly my number one receiver
Mhm.
coming out of that draft. Got but was injured already, and then is now going to be suspended for the first part of this year. But maybe he can show why he was so highly revered when he was drafted. So there's definitely intrigue with this receiving core, but how good can it be? How much do we like this secondary receiving core, and how much of last year was just great coaching, and how much of it was maybe they got a little lucky, and maybe teams are going to be more prepared to cover Amon-Ra St. Brown, put your number one corner on the inside to cover him. And could we see the team, them not do as well? I'm going to bet they're still going to be very good next year. I'm going to bet that, I'm honestly going to give it a tier 3 receiving core, but it's kind of one of those things where I kind of feel like this team, well, I also have it as a tier 3 running back room with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, but I kind of feel like this might be one of those situations where what's the expression? The some great the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's the
Yeah.
case of the Lions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And even though like the sum of its parts when it comes to Amon-Ra St. Brown is a really good sum. Like that
Yeah, he's a
he is
star.
yeah, I mean he's legitimately great. He's proven it over the last 2 seasons. I actually like Khalif Raymond, I think a little more than you. I think he's a
Okay.
pretty nice secondary option. I like DJ Shark, I think the one thing with him was like he was a nice outside option. Like
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if Marvin Jones is pretty good next year too. And I don't hate Josh Reynolds. Like there's a bunch of guys that I think are okay. Obviously, they have to play a little bit up. And Jameson Williams is one of those guys that I really think has the potential to be awesome. We haven't seen it yet, but I do think the potential's there. I'm still banking on him being pretty good contributor when he comes back. I guess the one question I'm going to have for this offense heading into next season is this team was the way they use Swift and Williams, not just running the football, but also in the passing game, I thought was really important to their success last season. They've obviously invested in Jahmyr Gibbs enough to believe he is going to be a number one option and can catch balls out of the backfield because I mean, it's just not justifiable to take a running back in the first round if he can't catch the ball. So I do think he can catch the ball. He had some really good moments in Alabama catching the ball out of the backfield. So him and Montgomery have to prove that they can do that aspect of the game because I thought Swift was really good at catching the ball. And I thought that was something that he was really good at just throughout the year. So those guys really have to show that they can do that next season for this offense to kind of stay at the level it was at.
Yeah, completely agree. The offensive line, you have three just stars. Taylor
Yeah.
Decker and Penei Sewell at the tackle position, and Frank Ragnow at the center position. Jonah Jackson and Vitae. I will not try to pronounce his first name because I don't think I'm going to quite. Not sure if I'll quite get that one. But I mean, it's rare to get an offensive line people talk about, right? It's rare to get the offensive line people are like, bringing up. It's a tier 1 offensive line. It's debatably the best offensive line in football.
Yeah, and when I said Minnesota probably is in the conversation for best tackles in the league, this is also in the best conversation for best tackles
Hmm.
in the league. It's amazing. I mean, you look at Decker, you look at Sewell, that's a monster duo. Throwing in Frank Ragnow in the middle, I mean, that's exactly what you want from an offensive line is, knocking out center, right tackle, left tackle. That's a huge thing. All those guys are awesome. No notes there. I mean, it's fantastic. Obviously, the guard play is a little bit in question, but I think those guys are good enough. Like they don't need to be stars in this group either, and I think that they're passable players.
Yeah. As for the defense, this is a kind of the question. What they went into the season trying to do was improve the defense. That was kind of their main goal, and I think that they succeeded. With the
Mhm.
addition of guys like Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, C.J. Gardner Johnson in the secondary, also Brian Branch, who they drafted. Also have Tracy Walker there, who I think is a solid safety. He might be the only starter that was on a starting roster last year in the secondary. But those are also some questions, right? And you have Jack Campbell, rookie linebacker, is a position that takes some time, although I do think he's pretty pro ready. Anzalone is fine. This is a tier 3 coverage unit for me. I like all the pieces individually as like flyers, and we're just gonna have to see how it goes. It's such a sort of hodgepodge, mix and match group that I think it's going to take some time for them to figure out how to play with each other, which I think,
Yeah.
is kind of my biggest concern about this team, more so than the players themselves.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. There is upside, but like you said, this is potentially like a really good group. Like, I mean, the thing is, like, you're still banking on like Emmanuel Mosley staying healthy, with which almost never happens. You're looking at Cam Sutton's a really nice option. He's a really nice number one guy. Um, and you look at the safety group. I think is just overall fantastic. I like Branch coming out of the draft. I thought that was a really good draft pick in the second round. CJ Gardner Johnson was obviously pretty savvy to be able to get him on the roster too. So you look at those two. I really liked what I saw from Kirby Joseph last year. I think he's a nice safety option too. With Tracy Walker, like that's a really nice safety group. How does this look with Sutton and Mosley? I think there's a lot of potential there for it could be a tier 2 or tier 1 secondary, but we got to see all those guys kind of come together and work out.
Yeah. As for the front seven, again, some things that I like, my love affair with Aiden Hutchinson, right? Definitely a big fan of him. I like James Houston a lot as well. I think he's should be a good number 2 edge rusher for Detroit. I think that the concern I have is kind of the rest of it. The interior defensive line currently some of the starters, Aleem McNeil, Isaiah Buggs are two guys currently listed as these starters. I don't know if I love that combo. I don't know if I love the sort of the depth here on this defensive line. It's again, I don't know what happened to Romeo Okwara. I thought he was pretty good, and he kind of fell off. I was interested in what Josh Pascal was going to do at the as an edge rusher. He didn't have a great rookie year, but maybe will do some stuff. You also have Julian Okwara there. I don't know. It's interesting, but as a whole, I really like 2 players on this Detroit Lions defensive front 7, I would say, and I'm intrigued in Jack Campbell. So I'm going to give it a tier 2 pass rush because of Hutchinson and because of Houston. But tier 4 or tier 4 run defense for me, just because of I don't love the interior and I don't love the linebackers. Although again, I'm intrigued in what Jack Campbell's going to do year 1. He's a rookie. That's my only critique of him.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and it's probably going to take Campbell a little bit of time to get into it. There's potential, I think, for this interior group because, like you said, Josh Pascal is a guy who's probably more of a pass rushing interior guy, but I do think he could be a decent option there. I like McNeil, I think, a little more than you do. I think he's a pretty good defensive tackle. I'm not giving up yet. He didn't play last season on Levi Owunzurike. He was a guy we
Okay.
both really liked in the
Mhm.
draft. Didn't work out in year 1. I'm not giving up on him yet. So I do think there's potential here for the interior, but the edge is where this team looks really good. Like you said, this could be a really good edge rusher group. And yeah, I mean, the thing is like if you'd said that if it's just like the Lions having a tier 2 pass rush and a tier 3 secondary is significantly better than what it was last season and what it was the year before
Mhm.
that. So I just think those small strides are enough to make the difference for me here.
I think so as well. I do think this is going to be a better team next year. Although I still just think, again, what are the expectations for the Lions? If the expectations are playoffs, I think we're good. I'll just say it right now. My prediction: I'm going 10-7 for the Detroit Lions. I'm not projecting them to have this dominant season. I think they'll be good. I think they'll be a good team, and I think that to me, clearly the favorites in the division. I have them with a 2-win lead over the next team I have, Minnesota. So, again, my rankings were the Lions with 10 wins, Vikings with 8 wins, Packers with 7, and Bears with 6. But, I guess my question is, like, if Emmanuel Mosley gets hurt, which he often does, like, are, what are we dealing with the Lions defense? Are we having another bad Lions defensive season? It feels like that's pretty. I feel like that there's a good chance that happens.
Yeah, there's a good chance it happens. I guess the thing is, like, I don't think it's going to be a disaster anymore. Like, I think it's going to be like
Right.
bad is an upgrade to what the Lions were defensively the last couple seasons. And so I feel like that's enough of a difference. And if the offense still performs pretty well, the defense gets marginally better, I do think that's a pretty interesting team to watch going forward.
Yeah. So what? Let's talk about them in terms of. So do you have a record prediction for the Lions?
I didn't make record predictions, but give me the over on 10 wins.
Okay.
Let's go.
So yeah.
The
You're saying
the Fighting Dan Campbells are winning 12 games next year. Book it.
okay. So are you buying into the Lions are championship contenders?
I think they're the second tier. Like, I think like maybe third tier, honestly. Because it's like I think that San Francisco and Philadelphia are bona fide contenders in my book.
Yeah.
I think Dallas is a bona fide, very good team in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that like Detroit and Seattle are the two teams that I'm looking at as like kind of interesting. And that's probably where I have it. And then beyond that, it's like the Saints have to win the division. So like that's basically how I look at the NFC. So maybe they're kind of like a tier 3-ish, but like I say that optimistically, like, yeah, I think some things could go wrong for like San Francisco or Philadelphia, and they could be one of those teams to capitalize because the Cowboys on paper just look slightly better, but like in practice, I don't know how much better they actually are.
Yeah. This is a great question. What impact does John Fox have on this? A huge one. They're championship contenders for that alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't ask him to make any game manager decisions.
Yeah. That would be a disaster.
Remember that time that he challenged a play thinking he had a touchdown, and it turns out the player fumbled, and then the ball went out of bounds, and so he ended up losing the ball?
Yeah.
That was an all-time John Fox moment. That's number one. We didn't talk about John Fox enough as a great, funny head coach. We talked about it with a lot of other guys. I feel like John Fox, an underappreciated, Jeff Fisher. John Fox to me is the same category of Jeff Fisher of a funny head coach.
He coached in Super Bowls.
Yeah, sure. I'm not saying he was okay. Again, not sure if that was necessarily because of him. A bit of it, game might have passed him by a little.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, same thing. Jeff Fisher was a yard away from going to overtime in a Super Bowl.
That's true. That is true.
Smith was in a Super Bowl. Hugh Jackson was not. He did not quite make the Super Bowl.
No, Freddie Kitchens.
No. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's different categories. There's the Freddie Kitchens, the Hugh Jackson. There's a lot of Browns head coaches. But then they're just bad. But then there's the not necessarily just terrible, but just funny.
Yeah, he's definitely in that funny tier. That's for sure.
So. It's like the guys who clearly know a lot about football, but somehow just haven't figured out how have clearly never played a game of Madden and don't get how the decision making works at all.
I would agree with that. He's definitely in that conversation. Jeff Fisher is the captain of that ship.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. All right. So that is our show. The Lions are championship contenders, according to one of us. Listen, I still think they're clearly the number one team in this division, and probably I could see them winning more than 10 games just due to the division. I have some concerns. I feel like this is not a perfect roster. This is a team we're expecting to perform better than the talent on this roster. Is that fair to say? This is a team we're expecting to perform better than the talent on their roster.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
I think a lot of it has to do with the division. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So if the Lions, let's say Jared Goff gets injured, Hendon Hooker isn't ready to go. We have a full season of Nate Sudfeld. Oh God, that'd be terrible. If that happens, who's winning the division? Is it Packers? You're going Packers? I guess you have the Packers making the playoffs, so you're pretty high in the Packers.
Yeah, I guess I'll take Green Bay in that stance. Or maybe Ben Johnson's as good as I say.
Maybe if he
Nate
makes
Sudfeld's in the
listen, if
playoffs.
Nate Sudfeld, if you can get Nate Sudfeld to the playoffs, he's better than Sean Payton.
Build statues at that point.
Yeah, exactly. That's like when That's like how Mike Tomlin's best year was the year that they went 8-8 with Mason Rudolph. Like that's it's not winning the Super Bowl. It's that year.
Yeah, didn't he? Mike Tomlin had a quarterback named Duck, and he was still like good.
Yeah.
Like I
I think
couldn't
that's the
believe
same
it.
year.
Yeah, because didn't Mason Rudolph get hit in the head? Yeah, he had a
We did get hit in
quarterback.
the head. I definitely remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah, he had a quarterback named Duck, and he was still pretty good. I mean, that's the most amazing thing ever. I can't take a person seriously whose name's Duck. I'm
Uh,
just,
In
I
fairness, I
can't
don't
do
believe
it.
that was his actual name. I believe that was a nickname.
Well, I'm gonna pretend like it was his actual name because that's
Okay.
ridiculous.
All right. Kyle, anti the name Doc. Next week, we're going to talk about why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will win the Super Bowl.
I don't know if I'm gonna join you on that one, but we'll talk about the NFC South.
Yes, we're going to talk about the NFC South, the three worst teams in football, and the Buccaneers. It'll be great.
You're talking yourself into the season. Is that what I'm gathering?
It's your God-given right as a fan to be too optimistic. Once we'll get to the your division later on. Well, you'll do the same thing.
Probably not, but we're gonna win the Super Bowl. So yeah.
I think I'm definitely higher on Tampa Bay than you are.
Yeah, I would say so.
I believe you said like they have like no chance of winning the division. I think I said like I could see a small scenario, and you just laughed at me.
Yeah, I was high on Baker Mayfield at one point, and I think I've just given up.
All right. Well, we'll get into it next week. Kyle, let
saw
us know
the
where can find us
practice
on
video.
Twitter before we head out. What was that?
I saw the practice video of him just airmailing.
Well, okay. Anyone can look bad in a practice video.
If you're gonna airmail Mike Evans, like you got problems. Mike Evans is like 6'10". No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, Tom
But
Brady did it in the conference championship against Green Bay. Worked out all right for him.
Fair enough. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Grondin. And make sure to follow the account page. That's at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Yes, of course. If you like audio only podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, this is available. Just search On the Sideline Podcast. It is there. Kyle, any final thoughts?
Not looking forward to the NFC South talk next week, but we got to do it anyway. So let's get into it, and everyone have a good week.
I'm looking forward to it. We could talk about Bijan Robinson. Come on, he's your guy.
I do like Bijan. Bijan is fantastic.
All right, so get ready for 55 minutes of Bijan Robinson next week. Again, thank you to everybody who watches or listens. We do appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.